City center tunnels are great. From Paris to Tokyo and Melbourne, these tunnels running beneath city streets have been a revolution, bringing trains downtown and speeding transit up. And while I love S-Bahns and RERs, and there are a number of places they'd make sense in North America, there's even lower hanging fruit, and that's the numerous rail corridors that cross city centers across the continent at grade. You know what I'm talking about? Light rail. Portland in particular is a great city. It's super charming, feels much bigger than it actually is, and it just has so much going on. And a big part of what makes Portland great is its rather uncharacteristically comprehensive rail transit system, MAX, or the Metropolitan Area Express, which spans the whole region with nearly 60 miles of track and over 90 different stations. It can take you to the airport and seemingly everywhere else in the region, including all around downtown. But MAX has some critical flaws, which suppress ridership down to levels that are just a fraction of what, say, Vancouver achieves. And that's Vancouver, Canada, not Vancouver, Washington. And while SkyTrain is great, these days even Seattle, which has a newer, smaller network than Portland, managed to move more people on rail. So how can we use a tunnel to upgrade MAX and make Portland's transit network even better? Let's talk about it. Welcome to RM Transit, where we talk about Portland and its need for a downtown rail tunnel. Consider subscribing to RM Transit for all your rail tunnel needs. While I mentioned that a lot of light rail systems across North America have trains crossing their downtowns at grade, a la Denver, Dallas, Calgary, and of course Portland, it's not the case that every light rail system in North America is limited to streetcar-style tracks in the city center. The most heavily used light rail systems on the continent, from Edmonton to Ottawa and Los Angeles, all have tunnels that carry trains across their downtowns. And for what it's worth, LA's only opened recently. These tunnels are pretty powerful, because in the city center of their respective cities, they each enable subway-like service, with underground stations, frequent service, and a lot of zip. And this was, of course, all part of the plan. You see, North American light rail was an import from Germany, but when you look at the greatest German light rail systems, like in say Frankfurt, they have a lot of tunnel, often not even just in the downtown core. It's worth going and looking at a system like Stuttgart, which has strategic tunnels all over the place to help separate trains from traffic and get transit to be faster and more competitive. I've heard people claim that Portland's lack of a downtown rail tunnel is just really a problem because it's been a victim of its own success, but Portland's transit system is less successful than the ones in Seattle or Vancouver. And I honestly think this was a mistake. It was a divergence from the German systems that inspired light rail in North America in the first place. And it's naturally created problems. If you ever tried to use Portland's MAX system like a subway to fly across downtown, you might have hopped a train and realized that you don't really fly. Trains run slowly, they aren't Seattle, much less Vancouver frequent, and they can even get stuck out in traffic lights. And while that's bad on its own, this is the Metropolitan Area Express. This is meant to be a regional network. And so if you can't even do a short trip downtown quickly, you're certainly not going to be able to do a giant cross-regional one. And as it turns out, there's a lot of people in the Portland region that are riding slow across downtown today. And even if you're just traveling to downtown, it still means the last mile of your trip is painfully slow. Now, why specifically is that? Well, for one, the stops on the red and blue lines in particular are really close together. But trains also have to deal with other traffic, whether that be bikes, pedestrians, or cars. Not to mention the really sharp turns that trains make in a few different places as they're crossing the city center. And all of that means, as per a Metro report, that going from the Lloyd Center to Goose Hollow, a distance of around 3 miles with 12 stops, takes over 20 minutes. You can literally bike faster. And you could ride light rail faster in Seattle, where a downtown tunnel exists and has existed from the beginning of the system. In fact, you can go from U District to Beacon Hill in 20 minutes, a distance of 7.5 miles. But the speed of trains is far from the only issue. Portland's city blocks are tiny and adorable, but they mean that train lengths have been limited. If Portland only has trains that are about half as long as those in Vancouver or Seattle, well, it's not going to be able to move as many people. And the capacity issues the system has today don't just come down to the small trains, because capacity is vehicle size times vehicles per hour, and the reality is the number of trains per hour that can run through downtown Portland is constrained. Most notably across the Willamette River on the Steel Bridge, which currently handles up to 40 trains per hour, which is impressive, but not enough for all of Portland's transit demand. And what's even worse is that the steel bridge is not particularly fast, could be described as kind of jank, and may well fall over in an earthquake. Okay, it won't fall over, but trains won't be running. And so that brings us to the solution, a downtown tunnel, which in my personal opinion is one of the best transit projects that could be executed anywhere in the US, and it could start tomorrow. A tunnel addresses so many of the issues Max faces and would supercharge the entire network, not just the downtown core. Not a word of a lie, I think a downtown tunnel in Portland could easily increase Max ridership by 1.5, maybe even 2 times, which is crazy. And there's actually already a pretty clear plan on what it would look like. It would go from Goose Hollow to the Lloyd Center with intermediate stops at Pioneer Square, Union Station, and Portland State University, as well as Rose Quarter Transit Center. So why then? Well, for one, a downtown tunnel would immediately cut travel time across the city center in half. So suddenly trips across downtown on transit become super practical. Used to Ubering from Portland State University to Union Station? It's cheaper and faster to get on the new Portland subway, and tourists could jump around downtown all day using Portland's supremely reasonable capped fare system. But the speed benefits obviously aren't just for people who stay downtown. Traveling into downtown, and out of it for that matter, also becomes much faster, and if you're traveling across the region, you get the full benefit the tunnel provides. And that's all while driving a car is only set to get slower. And with a dedicated tunnel across downtown, which would at least initially carry the red and blue lines, frequencies could be massively improved. Both lines could run every couple of minutes, and even if you regularly take the yellow or green line, you benefit too, because all of those slots freed up across the steel bridge allows for more yellow and green line service. And of course, all of this increased frequency, that makes trips faster too. If today you typically have to wait 10 or 15 minutes for a train, but in the future you only have to wait 5, you could be saving 5 to 10 minutes on every trip, and even more if you're transferring, meaning that this whole project could save you 20 or more minutes from your daily commute, which is massive. There are a lot of trips that people wouldn't even consider taking today on Max that would be completely competitive, not only with cycling and walking, but with driving with a downtown tunnel. And that would be huge for public transit. The capacity of the system also obviously grows a lot. With 2 more tracks across the Willamette, you can run way more service. And since the new tunnel would allow for upgrades across the red and blue lines that would allow for longer trains, you could easily triple system capacity. And the old red and blue line tracks that were so expensively installed in the streets of Portland, well, in other cities they might just be ripped out. But in Portland, they can be repurposed. The Portland streetcar can get another nice corridor that it can use to branch off and create new routes from. And it's also not just about speed and frequency, even if those are kind of the main things that make transit good. A tunnel, since let's be honest, it probably wouldn't see a train every 90 seconds, even if that would be very cool, would also mean more reliability by introducing a bit of slack into the system that doesn't really exist right now. And the benefits go beyond transit as well. Having another crossing of the Willamette would be very useful in a disaster situation, especially since tunnels are so resilient, you could use it to move supplies back and forth or shuttle people, and that's very valuable. So with the case for a tunnel obvious, what about the fine details? One thing that I think is critical is to make sure the stations are big enough. A sort of interesting thing about the tunnel alignment is that it sort of weaves between the current downtown routes of the red and blue and yellow and green lines. And from some of the materials I've looked at, it seems that planners have considered adding tunnel spurs, please, flying junctions, into the tunnel to allow for connections to the yellow and green line, allowing them to also take advantage of that infrastructure. Of course, you could always build a second downtown tunnel, which might be an interesting option, and depending on which direction you go, you want to protect for different future infrastructure. So I want to briefly talk about that. In a one-tunnel plan, you want to make sure that platforms are probably at least 400 feet or 120 meters long. And that would allow for trains to go from today's 2-car lengths up to an ultimate 5-car length, even if they don't get there anytime soon. And that's fine, because as London shows, urban rail tunnels last a very long time. And with that extra space, if you do eventually introduce yellow and green line service into the downtown tunnel, you can simply make red and blue line trains longer to compensate for lost capacity. And honestly, the great thing about a tunnel is it has so much capacity that even if you only had a single tunnel, you could still run every single line, all 5 of them, through it every 7.5 minutes. It's also worth pointing out that you probably want to create somewhere for Orange Line trains to turn around, perhaps in the north or east of the city, or maybe you just leave it on the surface and it can run more frequently as well. Now, if you go for a 2 tunnels eventually plan, you don't need to protect for the same amount of capacity, since the yellow and green lines will have their own tunnel to share with the orange line. That means you don't need to protect for 5-car trains in the future, and 4 or maybe even 3 would probably be reasonable. But you should protect for interchange stations while building the first tunnel, so that the connections into the second tunnel can be built more efficiently. And you might even want to do 2 interchanges given the arcing shape of the route. I think in terms of number of stations, the 5 or 6 in most plans is reasonable. The distance between stations is roughly 800 meters, which is about what you would expect from a subway. That's a sweet spot of distance that allows trains to get up to speed and seriously improve on current travel times while still providing decent coverage of the downtown and other core areas. Fewer stations just has kind of weak connectivity without you being able to go all that much faster, since the trains do have a maximum speed, while on the other hand, having more stations would be very expensive, and it would kind of cut back on some of the speed benefits as well. Although if we're being honest, a tunnel of any sort is probably going to be much faster than today. And then there's the cost issue. The stations on the tunnel are not going to be tiny, but there aren't going to be all that many of them, so if you build them cut and cover, they don't need to be super expensive. Which again is part of why you want the ones you really need, but no extraneous ones. At the same time, the amount of tunneling you actually have to do isn't that significant, because again, downtown tunnels are great, the distance isn't that large, and the benefit is enormous. It will cost a few $billion, but that's less than what Seattle or Vancouver are spending on their rail networks right now. And for that, you get a region-wide uplift, more speed, way more frequency, more resiliency, more reliability, and a better city. Not to mention a whole downtown subway system and the capacity to enable future lines and branches. So I think the only question we do need to ask is, when do we get on with it? Thanks for watching.